I've spent most of my 20s avoiding work. I live in rich people's empty houses across Europe, taking care of their pets and gardens while they're away. No rent, no bills, and no real job. Unbeknownst to the homeowners, I convert a room into a makeshift YouTube studio. I spend my time creating art, getting involved in social movements, and doing meaningful work in the world. But now I'm broke, I'm turning 30 next year, I'm just so tired and I can't keep living like this anymore. One of the main reasons I chose this jobless life, despite all the financial stress and the instability that comes with it, is that I've been so terrified of getting to my deathbed and realizing I lived a worthless life. There was a period where I really tried to find meaningful work. I tried startups, freelance gigs, creative work, non-profits, ethical work. I thought if I can just find the right kind of job, maybe I'd finally have purpose and be fulfilled. And I've been lucky in many ways. I haven't had what David Graeber called bullshit jobs, like the 20 to 50% of the population who secretly think their jobs are pointless and maybe even harmful, the work that exists solely to sustain the machinery of profit. I got to do exciting things like work for an environmental startup in China, work on social projects in Australia, and work as a carer in the US. But no matter how meaningful the work actually was, there was always this underlying, lingering sense of depression to it all.
How in the hell could any man enjoy being awakened at 6:30 a.m. by an alarm clock, leap out of bed, dress, force feed, shit, piss, brush teeth and hair, and fight traffic to get to a place where, essentially, you made lots of money for somebody else and were asked to be grateful for the opportunity to do so?
Even in the most interesting, exciting, or passion-filled work, the monotony of having to do it day in and day out, 5 days a week, slowly drains it of its joy. Work that might be great for a reasonable amount of time for the fun of it just becomes a burden for those who have to do it for 40 hours a week. The most meaningful job I ever had was as a carer, but the exploitation, poverty, wages, and constant exhaustion stripped away much of the fulfillment. In general, the people doing the most socially necessary, meaningful work, the teachers, nurses, rubbish collectors, are underpaid, overworked, and undervalued, whilst the people performing the most meaningless jobs, like advertising, corporate law, and weapons development, are paid and revered the most. Why? Because there's nothing in the logic of capitalism that compels it to cater for people's need for fulfillment and meaning.
Some of the stupidest and most obnoxious people in our society are treated as its paragons of virtue, and the most decent and caring people are regularly made to feel, not only made to do all the work, but made to feel that they're of no account and their lives and their feelings don't matter. I mean, it's a system of incredible violence that we live under.
I also used to hate, when I was working, how much a job boxes you into a fixed, stifling role. Teacher, doctor, carpenter, none of these identities say anything about who we actually are. And the more work consumed my life, and the more I was judging the value of things based on their economic criteria, the less I started to do other meaningful things in my life. Hobbies started to feel pointless. Why bother playing guitar if it doesn't pay? Why should I care about climate change when I'm already so exhausted? There's a kind of spiritual death that happens when you have so much inside of you to give. You feel like, I want to contribute to so many important things in this world, and instead you're forced to do bullshit all day.
I cannot be the only person who's been finding it super hard, just like difficult to wake up.
I think, and hear me out on this one, but I think it's because we are all sick of doing work that doesn't really matter. Like, that creator goes on to say, the last 2 years have been operating in absolute shambles. Like, we've watched society collapse in on itself a couple times now, and we're all just like sending emails and going to school and doing shifts and paying rent. And there's real work to be doing. Like, we should be preparing to deal with the next couple waves of disease and climate change. We should be tearing up highways and reintroducing native subspecies and like taking care of our topsoil, like work that actually matters. And here we are sending emails, like doing work that doesn't matter every single day is exhausting. Busy work is exhausting, especially when the stakes are this high.
Even the best paid jobs where I had a lot of autonomy and a lot of fulfillment, when they didn't engage my gifts, still felt deadening. Challenging and interesting weren't good enough. There was still this persistent small voice inside of me that was saying, you weren't put on this earth for this. The life that I'm living is not the same as the life that wants to live in me. There is a deeper life, a truer life I should be living. So work has become less a path for meaning and purpose than an obstacle to their discovery. We're living in a world that desperately needs us to do meaningful, revolutionary work, and yet most of us are stuck in jobs that drain our energy and prevent us from doing the work the world needs most. When I first realized just how much even the most meaningful work sucked, I thought I found the answer in entrepreneurship. If I could just get this channel to take off, get a few more patrons, publish my books, then I could finally live my dream life. I could finally escape the grind by doing something I loved. It's a seductive image, the modern myth of self-liberation via entrepreneurship. Be your own boss, start a side hustle, monetize your passions. It's framed as countercultural, a rebellion from the 9 to 5. But what I found is that it simply kept me in the same prison, only now I was holding the key. The entrepreneurial path didn't free me from work, it simply deepened my devotion to it. I became hyper-independent, self-exploiting, always grinding in the name of liberation and independence. A classic move of capitalism, sell the problem as the solution. Hate your job? Great. Start your own company, become your own brand. Exploit yourself before anyone else can. Even for those of us who aren't entrepreneurs, we're all in a sense encouraged to become entrepreneurs of the self. Buy better productivity apps, have a better attitude, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, take personal responsibility, find a better work-life balance, use better self-care. Resisting the tyranny of work is largely framed as a matter of individual will. These messages have us turning away from politics and social movements to instead become obsessed with personal happiness, self-improvement, and becoming a self-made man or woman. I'm not inherently against entrepreneurial dreams, I still have them, but I think it's vital to ask ourselves whether the escape routes sanctioned by capitalism offer any genuine liberation, or whether they simply help us to further tolerate the systems we're desperate to escape. Sure, we might be free to hustle on a side project, buy distractions, or work on our mindset, but we're not free to reject the necessity of selling our time to survive. We're not free to reimagine the nature of work itself, or to reshape the society that demands it. Maybe we need to stop asking how to work smarter and start asking why we need to work at all. I think part of the reason I chose this precarious, jobless, entrepreneurial life is because I've always had a hunger for greatness. I never wanted an ordinary life, the 9 to 5, the pension plan, the safe route. I wanted to write, to create, to partake in revolution. I feel a strange kinship to Timothée Chalamet when he said,
I'm really in pursuit of greatness.
Many people cling to capitalism because they fear that without the pressures of work and the incentives of money, We would lose our breakthroughs, our inventors, our geniuses. And I don't want to abandon the desire for greatness. My dreams excite me. I feel the books I want to write like little balls of energy inside of me that want to be released. But I really question to what extent a system that steals our lives, leaves us in a basic condition of precarity, and concentrates wealth at the top, can truly be a thriving ecosystem for human potential. As Richard Wolff asks,
by not providing the facilities and the leisure, how many geniuses were unable to make the contributions of which they were capable, to develop the capacities that they had?
sure, we can create great infrastructure, great technology, great feats of engineering and efficiency, but to what ends? A smarter phone, a faster algorithm, a taller skyscraper in a city full of unhoused people? We live in a world of immense productive potential, and yet we're faced with deprivation and ecological collapse. Because under capitalism, production, innovation, and greatness are funneled towards what is profitable, human and ecological needs are secondary. It starts to feel a bit like capitalism isn't about generating human greatness, but actively preventing it.
This kind of labour is the best police conceivable because it keeps a tight rein on everybody, hindering effectively the evolution of sensibility, aspiration, and the desire for independence. For labour consumes nerve power to an extraordinary extent, depleting the latter as to contemplation, musing, dreaming, concern, love, hatred.
Imagine how much greater the loves in our lives could be, our communities, our connections, if we weren't constantly battling for survival.
We don't know all the capacities we have. We don't know all the pleasures awaiting us out there. How about we have, craft centers where you can go, maintained by the community, and you can indulge me, make pots, carve things, paint things.
One of my all-time favorite questions to ask people is, what would you do if you didn't have to work? It's pretty incredible what you can find out about people when you give them permission to dream. My childhood friend Annie, the class clown, dismissed by teachers, underestimated, told she wouldn't amount to much, working as a hairdresser, harbours a secret love for farming. She told me if she had the chance, she'd devote herself to revolutionising England's broken food system. Even my dad, who I lovingly call a simple creature because he likes to sing his little songs, drink his tea, watch TV, go to sleep and repeat, doesn't think too deeply about anything, worked as an electrician his whole life, always said if he didn't have to work, he'd mostly do the same things he's currently doing. But when the corporation he worked for held a competition about who could create a new piece of machinery for the company, he won first prize. The man who doesn't think too deeply about anything came up with something no one else did. To me, it just goes to show that when given the opportunity, ordinary people can do extraordinary things. That's the quiet tragedy of a system built around endless labour. The missed potential, the communities that never got to fully form, the revolutionary that stays hidden inside the hairdresser, the inventor that never realized he had the capacity to invent. We all carry greatness inside of us. It's just that very few of us are given the time or the freedom to realize it. One of the hardest parts of living outside the system is the constant anxiety about security. I don't have my own home, I don't have a pension, I don't have many of the things that constitute a normal, safe, stable life. Sometimes it's honestly terrifying. But when I compare it to my life working full-time in London, the truth is I don't really know if I'm any more precarious now than I was then. Mass layoffs, gigification, automation means that most people are living under what Andre Gors called generalized insecurity. Even so-called stable roles feel fragile now. The old promise of work security in exchange for a lifetime of obedience is no longer true anymore. And then there's the hidden costs of working. When I had a full-time job, I spent so much just to survive it. Commuting, renting close to work, time-saving conveniences like takeaway, therapeutic consumption that served as consolations for the unmet needs of the spirit. Thomas Bevan called this the misery tax, the spending that keeps you functioning in a life you secretly hate. It's a vicious cycle. You think you need to work so much because you spend so much, but you spend so much because you work so much. Alan Watts, in The Wisdom of Insecurity, likens our pursuit of security to a breath retention contest. We hold on so tightly to jobs, titles, and status, hoping that we'll someday feel safe enough to exhale, but that moment never comes. To keep up with the Joneses, we adopt new ideals, new needs we didn't even know we had. We wall ourselves away in careers, homes, and identities, and the more tightly we cling, the scarier the outside world and other people become. And what happens when the job disappears, when retirement comes, when the identity we've clung to starts to crumble? Even for those who make it, who achieve the safety they've been hoping for, so often it just turns out hollow. Life behind metaphorical castle walls turns out to be rigid, lonely, and unfulfilling. As Watts writes,
We discover not only that there is no safety, but when we imagine we have found it, we don't like it.
For me, what's brought the most security hasn't been a paycheck, it's been people, community, knowing that if I need, I have someone to call, knowing I have a sofa to sleep on if I'm ever destitute. As the saying goes, I store my grain in the belly of my neighbour. I've also found a sort of soul security, the peace of mind that comes from doing what I love, from living in alignment with my spirit. That's not to romanticize or recommend this life. As I said, I'm so tired, I can't do it anymore. I still want to create, but I'm not sure how that's going to look with full-time work. My point is not to promote an insecure, precarious, jobless life, but to challenge the idea that normal work is the safe path. As Tennessee Williams wrote, security is a kind of death. The fear of insecurity, the constant striving for security, traps us in a system that promises safety but rarely delivers. The very things we rely on for stability leave us more unsettled and unstable than ever. I'm not proud of it, but often when people ask me what I do for work, I often just outright lie to people, because if I tell them I don't have a real job, I'm living in other people's homes, I can immediately feel the judgment coming. Oh, so you're lazy. But I'm not lazy, I work really hard. My resistance to work is not because I don't want to do anything and because I have nothing to give. It's because I have so much to give that I don't want to waste my life on something empty. Devon Price's Laziness Does Not Exist makes a powerful argument that what we call lazy might be our soul's rebellion against work we don't really want to be doing. It's that message that says, I wasn't put on the earth for this. It's time to start doing things that make me come alive. If we don't listen to that message, our bodies might make us stop through illness, depression, self-sabotage, or accident, disabling us from living a life that isn't aligned with our spirits. In that sense, the people we call lazy might very well be the ones with the most character, the most aliveness, the most gumption to see through the farce of modern life.
What made them lazy? They were smart enough to see that there is no meaning to what most of the world was doing on autopilot, but not smart enough to realize that they have their own meaning in the back of their minds or hidden in their drawers. It's precisely because we're not lazy that we want to quit working. Jesus, we've got work to do if we don't want to waste our lives on some job.
I think many people considered lazy might very well, under other circumstances, given other opportunities, be some of the most productive members of society of all. It makes me think of Heath Ledger, who basically admitted that if he weren't an actor, he'd essentially be a bum of society.
You know, I don't like to do anything for money. You know, I just don't. It bores me. I'm just hopeless like that. If I probably didn't do this, I probably wouldn't do anything. You know, I'm like that. I've never been able to work or be worked. I just have to be having fun. I have to find fun in it, and I do in this. I love it, and I have a huge fascination for the industry.
And sometimes being a bit lazy might very well be the most productive thing we could do, because often our best work comes from boredom, idleness, nothingness. In fact, I think we need more laziness, not less of it. We need more sheer sloth, more play, more recovery from work-induced exhaustion. Paul Lafargue, in The Praise of Idleness, wrote,
"O laziness, mother of the arts and noble virtues, be thou the balm of human anguish."
And let's just say there are some people whose spirit animal would be a sloth. Isn't there room for loving and accepting every type of person in this world, even the lazy ones?
The last thing I ever want to do is work. I'm the least ambitious man I've ever met in my life. I don't want to work at all. And the less I'm in, the better for me. And because I love sleeping and reading and not pretending I'm someone else with makeup on my face.
In general, though, I don't think people mind working hard. I think people want to work hard. What bothers them is not being necessary. For people connected to a meaning and purpose, hard work comes easy. Tellingly, people already do a huge amount of work without compensation. I mean, just look at Wikipedia, which essentially built the modern Library of Alexandria simply through nerds on the internet. So the critique of work isn't born out of laziness. Quite the opposite. It's born out of the recognition of just how much humans have to give. What I'm calling for is less a right to laziness than the right to realize our capabilities more fully. Despite everything I've said so far, I still find it really difficult to let go of the idea of work. I'm a little addicted to productivity. I measure my worth based on how much I can do. I still cling to the idea that through work I can get recognition, fulfillment, growth, and status. And it definitely doesn't help that I come from a long lineage of workaholics. But this obsession with work isn't innate, it's learnt. In 1883, Paul Lafargue attacked the widespread belief in the sanctity and moral duty of work.
A strange delusion possesses the working classes of the nations where capitalist civilization holds its sway. This delusion drags in its train the individual and social woes for which 2 centuries have tortured sad humanity. This delusion is the love of work, the furious passion for work, pushed even to the exhaustion of the vital force of the individual and his progeny.
What strikes me most of all is just how recent and constructed this glorification of work really is. Historically, labour done for wages wasn't glorified, it was condemned. In most European languages, labour referred exclusively to the toil done by bondsmen, serfs, and slaves. Ancient philosophers would have scoffed at our romanticization of work. The ancient Roman orator Cicero wrote,
"Whoever gives his labour for money sells himself and puts himself in the rank of slaves."
In the 19th century, labour movements decried wage labour as a new form of servitude, calling it wage slavery. The Shoemakers' Union wrote in 1870,
"Men working for wages are, in a greater or lesser degree, in the bonds of serfdom."
There's truth to this. Under capitalism, the whip might be more invisible, but it's no less lethal. If you don't work, you don't eat, earn bread or oblivion. Food, housing, and healthcare are privately owned and sold for profit. Most people have no real say in what they produce, how they produce it, when they produce, or who benefits from their labour. Even free time is not really free at all. Free time is mostly devoted to getting ready for work, going to work, returning from work, and recovering from work. Hobbies are monetized, social interactions become networking opportunities, education is reduced to a credential factory for job readiness, and we're expected to always be on, available, and responsive, whether in or outside the office. How much of our time can we confidently call our own? And it wasn't always this way.
So hunter-gatherer societies didn't have this kind of obsession with work that we do, this idea of having to work 60 hours, this obsession with productivity, growth, with solving the economic problem. Instead, they led lives which were dominated primarily by what we might call leisure time. I mean, some of it may have been spent rearing children and so on and so forth. But they only worked, on average, around 15 to 17 hours a week. And this is even in the toughest environments, like the Kalahari Desert. And what this says to me, and what it is that we as a species, we have this sense that we're somehow hardwired to work, that our lives are bereft of purpose and meaning if we don't work, if we don't prove ourselves socially in the workspace. The gatherer societies suggest to us that we're not hardwired to work. Somehow we have the sense that, if we don't have work, we're nothing. But hunter-gatherer societies suggest that actually we're a different kind of creature altogether.
It took centuries of brute force, coercion, and propaganda to make work sacred. Capitalism didn't just organize labor, it reshaped our very consciousnesses. As Antonio Gramsci argued, the ruling class maintains power not only through force, but also through hegemony, the subtle control of ideas, values, and beliefs. Media, education, culture, and religion all work in tandem to glorify and normalize work, to turn it into a moral imperative. We are taught this is human nature, but this devotion to work is not innate. It was constructed, indoctrinated, and beaten into us precisely to prevent us from seeing its true nature. In our reification of work, we've become like the slave who defends the master's house more fiercely than the master himself. Aside from the jobs I've already mentioned, when I look back at my time trying to fit into normal jobs, the common through line that I see is that I was desperately trying to fix work, and it just ended up breaking me instead. I tried moving to countries with better working conditions, but just realized that the exploitation was simply outsourced to the global south, where regulations are weaker. I tried working for ethical capitalists, the ones who meant well, but soon realized that the problem is not just bad bosses. I went for jobs where there was an emphasis on enjoying work, which just became extra emotional labor. Sometimes I find myself fantasizing about a time when women didn't have to work. It makes me feel like a bad feminist, but the truth is that equal access to the workplace often just meant equal access to exploitation. Mariosa da la Costa and Selma James urged women to resist the myth of liberation through work.
Slavery to an assembly line is not a liberation from slavery to a kitchen sink.
We hear constant talk of job creation, but why do we even want more jobs? As John Maynard Keynes once joked, if the point is simply to distribute money so people can survive, we might as well get people to dig holes and fill them up again. Wouldn't it be better just to let people live and free them to use their creative potential to meet the world's real needs?
The thing that people in power fear the most is a population that, has basic security and time. I mean, that started to happen in the late 60s. And look what happened. They freaked out. I mean, you can actually see this. There was, I've talked to people who were in different, sort of ruling class think tanks at the time, and they said there was a lot of discussion, what's going to happen when robots replace all the jobs? We thought the hippies are bad. What happens when the entire proletariat turns into hippies? Oh my God, it's going to be a disaster.
Decades ago, it was widely held belief that technological advancements would lead to a 15-hour work week. Productivity-wise, we're more than capable of this, but the promised liberation never arrived. Driven by a growth-dependent economy, companies have just taken the extra profits and forced laborers to work just as much, if not more, than before.
Technology that was supposed to free us from the drudgery of labor has not done so. It's denied us and thereby made a kind of mockery of the whole idea of real time off, real leisure, because it has been used to enhance profits, not to enhance the work-life balance.
In general, work reforms, no matter how well-meaning, serve as pressure release valves. They respond to unrest by offering just enough improvements to dampen revolutionary energy. And even those limited gains are fragile, non-binding, and easily rolled back.
I'm socialist. I'm a political revolutionary. I don't expect any reform to last longer than the willingness of people to fight to retain it, and longer than a progressive period in history will last. Periods change. And once you go into a regressive period, as you always do after a progressive period, under capitalism, all your reforms are swept under the rug. They're decimated. It's very difficult to retain them. You have to run like hell to stay in the same place, like in Alice in Wonderland. And half the time you run like hell and you still go backward, only you don't go backward quite so fast. So I am not surprised or disenchanted to find out that reforms are threatened, because I was never enchanted in the first place. But of course it's infuriating. One reason I'm a revolutionary is that it would be so much saving of energy, One short but good revolution, you take care of all these reforms. Instead, you're endlessly squandering hundreds of billions of man-hours and woman-hours to fight for this little reform here, and this little reform here, and this little reform someplace else, and none of it is ever stable.
To be clear, I'm not inherently against reforms. Andre Gause made a distinction between reformist reforms, which work within the system, and non-reformist reforms, which seek to transform it. What I'm simply trying to say is that all this fixing of work starts to feel absurd, like rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic, especially once I began to really internalize that if we keep working as much as we are producing at this scale, we are literally going to incinerate the planet. The real question seems to be not how we can improve work, but if this is a case of abolition or extinction. Before I ever heard of David Graeber or Paul Lafargue, before I ever heard the term abolish work, I already felt it in my body. Every cell inside of me resisted the idea that I should waste this one precious gift of life, earning the right to live. The concept of abolishing work might sound extreme, but at its core it asks a simple, powerful question. What if work was no longer organised around wage labour, and what would we do instead? Well, for starters, we could stop doing work that actively harms us, all those bullshit jobs.
Just like fire all those guys and, and give everybody the same amount of money. That'll work. And it'll reduce the size of government dramatically, because all those annoying people trying to make you feel bad about themselves, well, they'll get basic income too, so they can go off and become poets or musicians or, do something useful with their lives. They'll be happier too. I don't really want to be doing that. So that whole sort of mountain of paperwork will just kind of collapse.
Some work is essential, but instead of coercing people into it, imagine democratic workplaces where people can choose what they produce, how they produce it, and when. Where labour-saving tech actually saves labour. Where the material wealth created is distributed based on needs, not snuffled up by the people on top. Where anyone who wanted to contribute could do so freely on their own terms as an act of shared stewardship, not economic compulsion. We would all essentially be doing what we love, not as a disingenuous apology for accepting exploitation, but as a genuine description of the state of existence. Work would essentially be play, a game-like, craft-like activity, to the point where we'd all have Stephen Irwin level enthusiasm for our work.
Good as a fast car, a flash house and a gold-plated dunny to me. Absolutely no good at all. I've been put on this planet to protect wildlife and wilderness areas, which in essence is going to help humanity. I want to have the purest oceans. I want to be able to drink water straight out of that creek. I want to stop the ozone layer. I want to save the world.
And of course, there's always going to be unpleasant or difficult tasks, but so much of that can be reduced through smarter design, reduced waste, better production, rotated fairly instead of left to the poorest among us, or taken on freely by people who find meaning in the doing, because even so-called menial tasks shift when they're rooted in shared purpose. As writer Charles Eisenstein ponders,
is it not odd that farm workers toil painfully in the fields while their air-conditioned masters go home every weekend and putter about in their gardens? The problem isn't the work itself, it's how we structure, value, and assign it.
In a system that doesn't compel us to labour for basic necessities, everyone's artistic potential could be unlocked to the point where everything could become art, from the humblest kitchen knife to the tiles in a chimney piece. Just think of the painters in Edinburgh who voluntarily painted the walls and ceilings of the hospitals for the poor, or how the Grecian urns we now revere in museums and immortalize in poetry once held something as simple as olive oil. Other aspects of life previously sidelined to the more important stuff of work could now finally reclaim its place as central to a meaningful existence. Theodor Adorno passionately rejected the term hobby, believing it trivialized the value of unpaid activities.
I have no hobby. Not that I am the kind of workaholic who is incapable of doing anything with his time but applying himself industriously to the required task. But as far as my activities beyond the bounds of my recognized profession are concerned, I take them all without exception very seriously. Making music, listening to music, reading with all my attention, these activities are part and parcel of my life. To call them hobbies would make a mockery of them.
Far from being less productive and efficient, perhaps we'd be capable of more than ever before. I, for example, would happily work 12 hours a day if I could do intellectual work in the morning, some manual work in the afternoon, so that my brain can be free to dream, and that could then be channeled into my artistic pursuits in the evening witching hours. I think Peter Kropotkin put it well when he said,
Will the poet be less a poet after having worked out of doors or helped with his hands to multiply his work? Will the novelist lose his knowledge of human nature after having rubbed shoulders with other men in the forest or the factory, in the laying out of a road or a railway line?
just as the autonomists fought for the right to feel the sun on their skin, to play with their children, abolishing work is far more than just about work. It's about what we get to do with this one wild and precious life. How much time we spend with our loved ones before we die, and whether we get to discover and nurture our gifts and give them to the world.
Many indigenous peoples share the understanding that we are each endowed with a particular gift, a unique ability. Birds to sing and stars to glitter, for instance. It's understood that these gifts have a dual nature, though. A gift is also a responsibility. If the bird's gift is song, then it has a responsibility to greet the day with music. It is the duty of the birds to sing, and the rest of us to receive the song as a gift. Asking what is our responsibility is perhaps also to ask, what is our gift?
Plants don't know the unique role they play in the broader life-sustaining ecosystem, yet each of them makes a vital contribution to the web of life on Earth. The beauty of this interdependency is that every plant works to increase its own growth and survival, but when the individuals flourish, so does the whole system. The strength of the whole depends on the strength of its parts. Every living being offers a necessary gift to the well-being of the collective. Even the parts discarded, overlooked, like the weeds, play an essential role. Through symbiosis and cooperation, survival. In the same way, each of us carries gifts to offer the world. For the whole to thrive, every person needs to nurture their gifts. In this great unfolding of life, ideas, thoughts, and creations lie within us, waiting to be shared with the world. Rick Rubin put it beautifully when he said,
We may not have a great understanding of what this magnum opus is, because we only see the small part we play. The bee, attracted by the scent of the flower, lands on one, then another, inadvertently enabling reproduction. Should the bee go extinct, not just flowers, but birds, small mammals, and humans would likely also cease to exist. It's fair to assume that the bee doesn't know its role in this interconnected puzzle and in preserving the balance of nature. The bee is simply being.
And I know some people will be thinking, I don't have any gifts. But could it be that you haven't been given the opportunity to express or realize those gifts? As Rumi wrote, as you start to walk on the way appears. And maybe we're not quite ready to tap into those gifts, and that's okay. Bell Hooks reminds us that our hearts have to be ready for the weight of our calling. There's no need to force or cajole ourselves. In Sonia Renee Taylor's analogy, just as an acorn doesn't need pressure or persuasion to become a tree, given the right water and sunlight, it naturally grows into a mighty oak and offers its gifts to the world. Our role is simply to be. With the right nourishment and conditions, what is in us will naturally emerge. When we surrender to what life asks of us, we rescue ourselves from the distress, anguish, and anxiety that inevitably arises when we approach work with attachment to outcome. It's a serene acceptance that I'm here simply doing the work I feel called to do. My assignment is simply to show up, to respond to the assignment life has placed in my hands, and to do it with as much love and integrity as I can muster. The rest is not up to me. You might wonder, what if my gifts lead me to working in the stock market or creating bombs, something harmful like that? And I say, well, maybe do it anyway. As we strengthen the capacity to listen deeply within, the impulse to act in wiser ways than we can possibly imagine can't but help to arise. That doesn't mean the path is always joyful. When Rosa Parks was asked why she refused to give up her seat, she said,
I sat down because I was tired.
Not tired in body, but in spirit. Tired of denying her soul's claim to selfhood. She sat down because she decided,
I will no longer act on the outside in a way that contradicts the truth that I hold deeply on the inside.
Which was her way of saying,
the punishment imposed on us for claiming our true self can never be worse than the soul murder we impose on ourselves by failing to make that claim. And the converse is true as well. No reward anyone might give us could possibly be greater than the reward that comes from living by our own best lights.
My greatest hope is that this message reaches you in your deepest place of longing and possibility. An invitation to listen deeply to your gifts, to greet them with tenderness. Don't get a job, get to the work your soul is here to do. Because when we are really connected to our gifts, our aliveness, our care, our creativity, we can't help but to feel how incompatible they are with systems that seek to diminish and destroy. From that place of deep alignment, creating a world where the labor of love isn't coerced but freely offered isn't a burden. It becomes a natural expression of who we are, a devotion, a kind of love, freely offered as a sacred gift to each other, to ourselves, and to the earth. I'd so love for you to share in the comment section, what are your gifts? And how are you offering them? As I said, I'm not really sure how much longer I can create, in what capacity I can create. I deeply long to create. I really do love this, but I'm tired and I think I no longer have an editor, so I'm not sure how exactly I'm going to make this work alongside doing a job. So if anyone ever wanted to contribute to support this channel, I would really be deeply grateful, of course, only if you're able, only if that's possible to you, only if it feels like a gift you're really freely, lovingly wanting to give. But yes, I thought it might be worth asking, and thank you so much for watching this video. It really helps if you like, subscribe, share. In exchange for becoming a patron or becoming a member on this channel, you can get access to a backlog of patron-only videos. You can also get access to the bi-weekly calls where we have a book club and community discussions about topics that our members like to choose. On Patreon, I made videos about what work is ours to do and all the jobs I ever had. And you may like my video on this channel called Nobody Wants to Work Anymore. Hitting the notification bell, liking, subscribing, and sharing this video is really helpful. Thank you, and I wish you a beautiful day.